Part 1, the empty chair. There was no chair for me, not one. I stood at the entrance of the wedding hall, staring at the family table where my husband sat beside his sister, their friends, their elegant, smug faces. But not mine. No name card, no seat. Just silence that screamed louder than any insult. Across the room, my husband, Martin, caught my gaze and offered a smirk. "Must have been a mix-up," he said, his tone thick with pretense. "Too many guests, I guess." The others laughed softly. Polite, rehearsed laughter, like they all knew this was coming. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I smiled, and I turned around. As I walked past the carved white pillars and out of the grand entrance, I could feel it, the final thread snapping. The years of trying. The years of swallowing insults with wine and smiling through dismissals. All of it. Gone. In that moment, something inside me stopped begging to belong. I stepped outside into the cool October air, pulled out my phone, and opened a folder I had prepared weeks ago. A silent alarm, the beginning of my own ceremony, one they wouldn't forget. Part 2, where I came from. My name is Alina Monroe. 15 years ago, I was just a quiet girl from a forgotten corner of Virginia, raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs and believed in dignity more than decoration. I wasn't born into money, but I was born with drive. A scholarship brought me to a state university. I majored in hospitality, not because it sounded elegant, but because it was practical. After graduation, I didn't take a break. I built. One event after another, one mistake at a time, I learned how to turn chaos into grace. Eventually, I became one of the most sought-after event planners on the East Coast. My name started appearing in circles that once would have ignored a girl like me. That's when I met Martin Langford. It was at the anniversary gala of a senator's wife, an event I had planned. Martin, the golden son of the Langford dynasty, a family rooted in real estate and legacy, watched me from across the room as I coordinated every moving piece like clockwork. "Was it really you who made all this happen?" he asked afterward, a glass of champagne in his hand, a charming half-smile playing on his lips. I didn't think much of it then, but the Langfords were thinking plenty. They saw someone who could make their image shine, someone competent, someone malleable, someone from nowhere. Martin pursued me relentlessly. He made me feel seen not for where I came from, but for what I could build. And after a year of dating, he proposed. At first, I thought I'd finally found something I'd spent a lifetime searching for. Not wealth, not prestige, but family. I was wrong. The Langfords welcomed me in politely, frostily, and with eyes that measured rather than embraced. Martin's mother, Margaret, liked to say I had good instincts, considering my background. At brunches with her friends, she introduced me as Alina, the event girl, very sweet, very simple. His sister, Clara, always smiled with a warmth that felt rehearsed, too perfect, too precise. She asked about my work often, but never really listened to the answers. At first, I told myself I was overthinking, that these were just growing pains in a powerful family, that Martin was different. That was the lie I needed to survive. The first fracture. It started with a wedding. Not mine, Clara's. When Martin's sister announced her engagement, I expected tension, of course. I was, after all, the family planner. But what I didn't expect was entitlement disguised as affection. "Alina, you'll be planning the wedding, right?" Margaret had asked sweetly, her voice drenched in expectation. "I mean, you're practically family." It wasn't a request. And it came with no contract, no budget, no respect, just an assumption that I would offer my professional services as a daughter-in-law, not as a professional. Still, I agreed. Not because I wanted to impress them, I stopped trying long ago, but because I knew this would be my line in the sand. I would do the job, flawlessly, and they would see. For months, I poured myself into Clara's 3-day extravaganza, a wedding fit for royalty, or at least people pretending to be. I leveraged every contact I had, every ounce of experience to pull off the impossible, but something felt off. Vendors started calling me about late payments. The venue coordinator mentioned bounced deposits. I checked the shared financial spreadsheets and saw what wasn't meant for my eyes. The Langford accounts were bleeding, maxed credit lines, a mortgaged estate, a collapsing trust. When I brought it up to Martin, he brushed it off. "Our accountant's just being cautious," he said, without looking up from his phone, but I had seen the numbers on his laptop, and they weren't cautious. They were desperate. I continued anyway, quietly, carefully, covering gaps with funds from my own company, unwilling to let the event collapse under my name. Then, one morning, the morning we were to leave for the wedding, Martin stepped into the shower and his phone lit up. I don't usually check his messages, but something stopped me from looking away. "Can't wait to see you this weekend, 2 hearts. Have you told your family yet?" The sender, Avery Blake, his ex. My hands moved before my mind could. I opened the thread, and what I found wasn't an innocent reunion. It was a betrayal 6 months deep. Avery was 4 months pregnant. They had been planning a future while I had been planning a wedding. The staged exit. I packed my suitcase in silence. The air was crisp, the autumn sun filtered through the windows, and Martin hummed in the bathroom, oblivious or pretending to be. I had already forwarded the screenshots to my encrypted cloud, deleted the evidence from his phone, and rehearsed the smile I would wear for the next 3 days. As our car cruised through the golden countryside toward the Langford estate in upstate New York, I gazed out the window, memorizing every shadow, every leaf. I wasn't arriving as a wife anymore. I was arriving as a witness. Clara's wedding was designed to be the Langfords' grand display, their performance of power, lineage, and prestige. I had built that illusion for them with brutal precision. And now, I was the only part of the illusion that didn't belong. From the moment we arrived, I was excluded, not overtly, but deliberately. The guest suite they gave me was on the opposite wing of the estate, far from the family core. The welcome dinner, my name was mysteriously absent from the seating chart. I was redirected to sit with the staff. Clara offered an apologetic smile. "Oh, Alina, it's just a last-minute mix-up. You understand, right?" I did, and it burned. Each morning, Martin left early without a word, without a glance. One day, he forgot to lock his briefcase. Inside, I found exactly what I feared: legal drafts from the Langford family attorney dated weeks prior, divorce proceedings already in motion. I wasn't just being erased, I was being orchestrated. A yellow legal pad sat on top of the documents. On it, in Margaret's angular handwriting, was a plan titled coldly, "Strategy for Separation." Below it, bullet points on how to provoke my unbalanced behavior during the wedding, how to paint me as emotionally erratic, unstable, and unsuitable for life among high society. The final line was underlined twice. "Public exclusion equals graceful exit." My hands trembled, but I didn't cry. Instead, I smiled at the mirror later that evening, rehearsed, poised, mechanical. I now understood. Clara's wedding was not just a celebration. It was my termination ceremony, the silent awakening. The morning of Clara's wedding broke with a quiet so sharp it could slice skin. I stood in the bridal suite, cross-checking the timeline like I always did. Calm, focused, perfect. Then I heard it through the partially closed door of the room next to mine. Margaret's voice, low, clipped, authoritative. "There will be 4 chairs at the family table, not 5. The seating is final." A pause then. "She is not one of us. This is a bloodline celebration. If she decides to leave, let her." It wasn't an oversight. It was the plan, a ritual of rejection performed with cruel elegance. They didn't want a fight. They wanted surrender, and they wanted to make it look like it was mine. I returned to my room and shut the door, not loudly, quietly like someone laying down the last stone in a tomb. I pulled out my tablet and opened the contingency protocol I had drafted in private weeks earlier. As a planner, I always anticipated disaster. What they never counted on was that I'd plan for them. Every contract, every transaction, every vendor agreement, they were under my company's name. My guarantees, my money, and now my choice. I composed a series of messages, each one like a match struck silently in the dark. The venue, the caterers, the hotel, the floral design team, even the private car service. Each one received an identical instruction. Freeze all pending charges, do not accept any alternate payment, refer all inquiries to me directly. Then I scheduled the emails, delay 6 hours. I would give them one last performance. And then the curtain would fall. As I applied my makeup in the mirror, I noticed something. My reflection didn't look tired anymore. It looked calm, not because I was numb, but because I was ready. They had tried to humiliate me into silence. Instead, they had clarified my resolve. This was no longer about inclusion. This was about reclaiming my name, the unseating. The ceremony unfolded exactly as I had envisioned it. The guests were radiant, the chandeliers shimmering, the string quartet playing with precision. The Langfords beamed, floating on the illusion of grandeur, unaware that the foundation beneath them had already begun to crack. I arrived at the chapel precisely on time, dressed in the navy blue suit I had chosen with surgical intent, not glamorous but authoritative. Inside, everything sparkled. The place cards, the centerpieces, the Langford crest embroidered onto silk napkins. My touch was everywhere, my fingerprints my standard, and then the moment arrived. I followed Martin into the family section, but as I approached the table, I stopped. There were 4 chairs, not 5, all filled, no name card for me, no space, no mistake. Margaret turned, feigning surprise. "Is something wrong, Alina?" Her voice floated, innocent, rehearsed, just loud enough for surrounding guests to hear. "There seems to be an issue," I replied, voice steady. "There's no seat for me." Martin's brows furrowed in mock concern. "That's strange, perhaps a miscommunication with the venue?" Clara leaned in. "Maybe we just miscounted," she said with a sugar-dipped grin. The guests around us shifted, sensing tension but not daring to look directly. I stood still, observed, took a mental snapshot of every face. And then, with the calm of a surgeon, I whispered, "So that's how it is, I understand." They didn't expect that, not the absence of tears, not the refusal to scream, just 5 words and every smile in that circle froze. I turned around, heels clicking against marble, and walked straight out of the chapel. I didn't run, I didn't tremble. I nodded to the staff, stepped into the waiting car, and drove to the cafe 2 blocks away, one I had scouted weeks ago just in case. A black coffee. A corner table. And then action. I sent the override to my coordinator, Patricia. Within minutes, the entire operation began to unravel. Funds frozen, vendors notified, hotel reservation canceled. Catering halted. Payments processed through my corporate accounts reversed. I watched the chaos unfold from afar, phone vibrating with messages from Martin. "Alina, what's going on?" "Alina, the venue says payments void." "Alina, fix this now." Then's my mother's crying. Then, "You don't know what you've done." And finally, "Please." I didn't reply. I simply returned to the venue through the service entrance, handed Patricia a sealed envelope. "Is it done?" I asked. She nodded. "The entire Langford payment structure is collapsing in real time." Then give them 5 minutes and let them choke on their own script. From a shadowed alcove, I watched it unfold like opera, Clara's smile vanishing, Margaret clutching her pearls, Martin pale with realization. The wedding had no funding. The bride had no backup. The legacy had no shield. And I, the simple girl from nowhere, had no seat, because I had outgrown their table. The empty seat. I stood still as the storm unfolded. From my hidden vantage point, I watched Margaret gesture furiously at the venue manager. Clara's groom looked panicked, whispering into his phone. Martin sat slumped in his chair, one hand gripping the edge of the table like a man watching his empire sink. They weren't angry at me. They were angry they had miscalculated me. I stepped out of the shadows. The room quieted. 4 heads turned: Margaret, Clara, Martin, and the man who was supposed to marry into prestige. Margaret was the first to speak. "How dare you ruin this day?" I smiled, not cruelly, not even proudly, just free. "I learned from the best," I replied softly. "You orchestrated my public removal. I simply rewrote the ending." Martin shot up. "You had no right." "I had every right." I cut him off. "Every contract, every arrangement, every signature, mine." Clara hissed, "You'll regret this." "No," I said, eyes locked on Martin. "I won't, but you will when the Financial Commission sees the documents, the hidden accounts, the misuse of funds, the love child scandal, the staged divorce strategy." And just like that, the performance ended. There were no more lines for them to deliver, no more masks to wear, no more seats left to steal. I walked away that day not as a victim, not as a wife discarded, but as a woman who chose truth over comfort. A week later, the scandal broke. Headlines, inquiries, resignations, and I rebuilt. Without noise, without them, my business flourished. Clients respected what the Langfords never could: my integrity. My work spoke louder than my bloodline ever needed to. 6 months later, I found myself in Florence, overseeing a wedding on a hillside villa, bathed in Tuscan sunlight. A gentle breeze passed as I looked over the celebration I had crafted, not for legacy, not for status, but for love, and there it was again. An empty chair, not one meant for me, but left intentionally open. Not as an insult, but as a reminder that not every table deserves your presence. And sometimes the seat they withhold is the one that sets you free.